Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Spanglish Sports World English edition. Today in the show, we will be joined by baseball royalty, not from the playing field, but from the family of baseball. We will be having as a guest Leury Michelle Moreno, the daughter of baseball legend of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Omar Moreno. Just want to remind you to that Single TV can be found on Google Chromecast, uh, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all TVs, smart TVs 2016 and forward. Remember to go down to the iOS and Android stores to download the app of Single TV, where you can watch this show and many others that we have to offer. Well, as you can see in camera right now, we have baseball royalty, uh, as I call it, on Leury Moreno. Leury, welcome to Spanglish Sports World. Welcome to your house. Can you hear me, Leury? I cannot hear you. I cannot. I can hear. Try to log out and log in again to see if the sound comes in. Well, we are having some technical difficulties, but let's see if we can get her back on. This is an amazing individual. Is the daughter of, as I said, baseball legend Omar Moreno. Uh, it's uh, it's great to be able to talk to her, and she will bring you some good news because you might be. We are going to be here at Spanglish Sports World in, and here she is. Let's see, Leury, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, awesome! Now we can hear you. So, as I was saying, Leury is part of baseball royalty, daughter of the great pirate legend Omar Moreno, uh, of the legacy of the era of the Pittsburgh Pirates, where nobody else could touch them. And Leury, welcome to your house. Welcome to Spanglish Sports World.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. This is the first show I've ever been, so thanks.
So, Leury, we got to meet through a platform called Clubhouse, where you have with Kelly Stargell and other kids of baseball players, a show called Growing in MLB. Uh, how did the show come about? How why did you guys get it started?
Well, it's funny because people always just back in the day in 79 they were a family because that was a slogan. But we actually have kept in touch throughout all these years. Like a lot of us have kept in touch. I remember when I was in college and I had a couple of the people that would that played with my dad and were managers. I went to school in Lynn University, so I would go down to Miami and want to manage and meet with them after the games and like meet with my baseball uncles and aunts over there in Miami. So I've always had a very close relationship with all of those players along with their kids. So Kelly and I, were actually very close. And, Willie Stargell was kind of like my dad's dad in or everybody's dad, Pops. And we were talking about it, and we're like, we should bring in more people, bring in more MLB kids. Well, now adults, but kids. And it ended up like we ended up just kind of spreading the word, and we have so many that are part of our group now. So yeah, we're always kind of growing. So that's really exciting to go in there and be able to I'll tell you this, I always felt like I was a outcast in the world because nobody could really relate to the things that I would say. Being around legends and being around famous people, people always saw that as, oh, she's probably trying to show off, but I wasn't. It was normal for me. So being in this space once a week with like my other MLB, you know, kids, now adults, and them saying exactly the same things that I'm thinking and that I was thinking growing up is amazing. So that's kind of how it came about.
No, and it's interesting because nobody ever thinks. Everyone thinks of the players as a whole. Nobody has a vision of the families.
Hmm.
Those families that struggled and lived their parents' lives.
Hmm.
You know, I have always admired a lot of the kids because they had to go through the struggle of going to school sometimes and getting the punishment for their dad's actions on the field sometimes. You know, criticized. Your dad didn't do this time.
Yeah, I don't remember that much. I was very young when my dad retired. So I don't remember much of his playing days. What I remember more is kind of like his retirement and how he's been around baseball and signings and around, all these MLB legends through the years. But I have to say, one of the things that no, but that you're totally right. One of the things that is never touched upon is the fact that at least, most of us in that era, we grew up feeling that we had a lot of social responsibility, that we had to act a certain way to represent our fathers and our family name, which is really how we grew up. And that obviously takes a toll on everybody, but nobody really, like you said, nobody sees the behind the scenes of the player. Everybody just kind of sees like the player and what he does on the field, but nobody sees that same player has a family and goes home to kids and goes home to a lot of things that a regular person does. So yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, and it's not to say that with most parents it happened, but most athletes sometimes tend to take out the frustrations on their families because they don't have another exit
Hmm.
exit strategy. You know what I mean? They don't want to do it, but it happens. We have seen it throughout the years that some kids are not close to the now that they are adults, they are not close to their families because dad came home and he had a bad day at the stadium, and he took out his frustrations without wanting to do it on the kids or their families.
And I think and actually one of the things that a lot of the MLB, I'd say kids, now adults, but the women actually do experience is the fact that we always, not usually the sons, but usually like the women. I could speak for like Kelly Stardo, and I could speak for Sarah Madlock, and a couple of others that end up managing when the fathers retire. They end up kind of being their father's personal assistant, because during the game and during the times that they play, nobody realizes that they have everybody doing stuff for them. So when they retire and all this stuff is going on, they're basically kind of like on their own. So it's like us, the daughter. Usually it's the daughters. I really have never seen a son do that, but like us, the daughters, like we take upon the fact that we take care of our fathers and their signings and their appearances. And that's a very common thread that I actually thought I was the only one that did that, but come to find out, all of us, like most of the women actually did that, the daughters. So
Yeah, you assume the responsibility not just for taking care of him after his career, but as well of all his personal stuff that has to get done.
mhm.
And it's interesting because you know no one thinks everyone thinks, oh, these guys make so much money that when they finish they have a great agent, and they just keep going. That relationship keeps going on, but that's only in the terms of the big names that can keep that going. I mean,
Usually
uh,
it's so I don't even think that big names keep it going after they retire. You know what I mean? Like you have a big agent at your prime when you're playing, but once you retire, you're kind of on your own. And I've seen a lot of agents also that are not good agents, or a lot of money managers that don't do a great job managing players' money. And kind of like when the players retire, they're literally on their own. They didn't do a good job and they spend it all. You know what I mean? So it's one of these things where you always have to be surrounded by the right people.
so let's get into the interesting stuff, because there is Omar Moreno, the player, and then there is Omar Moreno, the father, the citizen, and the husband.
Hmm.
Uh, and I had the distinct pleasure of interviewing your dad on a bunch of times on and off the field. And to me, always the Omar Moreno that I remember from after interviews and after watching him play was the very caring and charismatic guy that always was smiling about everything. And you know, tell what do you remember your dad during his way of uh, dealing with you guys while he was playing
I don't remember my dad playing at all.
at
So
all?
so that is something that my brother Omar Jr. would probably be best for, but I don't remember him. Um, I remember I remember him once he retired, and I remember being in we moved back to Panama after a while. He's from Panama. I remember the one thing he used to do was the bus would come pick us up, and he would always like wake up in we have, as you know, like Latin countries, like we had a house full of staff. We had, people that made breakfast and lunch and dinner, and he would always wake up and tell everybody to stay sleeping, that he was going to make us breakfast. Like it was me, my older brother OJ, and my younger brother Jesse, that he would make us breakfast. And I was like, okay. So he would make us breakfast, and it was literally scrambled eggs every day. That's like, I would like do like scrambled eggs with patacones, or like at least patacones. And like, so we would have like that. And then I remember like telling him like one day, like, Dad, but why don't you just add some ham in there or something? So then he would do like scrambled eggs and ham and tostones, like that's what, so he was a regular dad. Like everybody asked me though, he was a regular dad. He would actually he tried to enjoy time with us, and he would want, like, whenever the bus went to pick us up for school, he would always be like, don't worry about it, I'll go drop you off. Or, and my school was like 45 minutes or 30 minutes from my house, but he's like, it's fine, I'll drop you guys off. And he would do that because he wanted to like spend time with us, or just make up for lost time, I'd say. But those are like my memories with him. He was always, my dad was a very hands-on dad. When we were younger. So that's I remember that. I remember much. I remember, like I said, once he retired.
And I mean, and we can we probably can go on about, he is not just a Panamanian player. He was one of the stars
Mm.
that came out of that country and really made it, with a standard name. How was when you went to school and you were recognized as the daughter of Omar Moreno? How
Mhm.
was that attitude from the kids?
That is something I do know about, because Panama, like you said, Panama is a small country, and to be honest, my brother and I were the only Black kids in the entire school, and basically, that's kind of how we grew up. So we were the only Black children there. And I do remember I remember bringing my dad in for show and tell, and like kids like wanting his autograph, and like whenever he came, like, you know, they would always want photos and um stuff like that. Like I remember all that. My school, which I grew up in and I loved, it was the International School of Panama, and it was one of these schools that had very high profile people, had profile children. So we didn't feel that. Like I didn't really, you know, they would get, I remember them, you know, my classmates would get excited over if I went to an all-star game and I came back, and like this is how naive, like, and how I was. Like I would go to an all-star game and I would bring back like the baseball cards that they give out, and I would give it to like my friends and like the kids that I was really friends, or kids that I knew were like really close or whatever, stuff like that. But it was never like, I never in that space, I never felt um obviously the only difference was my race, but overall, like, we were never, you know, seen any different, just because like I said, there were a lot of high profile kids in my school.
So you came back to North America after a while. How was the growing up in a Latin country and transitioning to the North America again? How was that transition? Because I imagine it wasn't an easy thing, and now you're the, I don't remember where you did you go back to Pittsburgh, or you went
For
where did
or for well, I actually, when my dad retired like years after, we ended up moving to Panama. So we were in Panama. I went to high school there and I graduated from the International School of Panama. And then I went to college, and I went to college at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida, which Boca Raton, Florida was the place that my dad had his off-season house when he used to play.
yeah.
So that's where I went.
Awesome. No, no, I didn't remember quite where he was. I know that because I remember in that I used when after he retired, I interviewed him twice,
Hmm.
and I live in Boca, so I as well. I have my house in Boca,
Okay.
so I wasn't I don't remember. I think it was the twice I interviewed him in Florida as well.
Okay.
But um, how was that experience in college? Did you have where you? I imagine not many kids knew your dad after when you went to college, because it was a different era in the game.
Hmm.
Uh, but how was that experience at Lynn College?
It was fun. I enjoyed it. I I actually I was very close to a lot of the baseball players there, and actually one of my best friends in college, actually, which is it's so random and so weird, and we're not super in touch, but I know I follow him on Instagram and on Facebook, and I see his family. One of the persons that I clicked the most in college was Bo Diaz Jr.
Oh wow!
Yes. So Bo and I were literally kind of inseparable, and he actually played for the baseball team. So I ended up like going to all his games, and I became friends with like the head coach's wife and stuff like that. And I remember that during that time I had a lot of friends that were playing baseball in the major leagues, and some of them would actually come over during their like off days and visit me in college, and everybody was kind of like, what just happened, like, why is this, it's, you know, they were like the it people back then, and they're like, why is this person here, but they were just friends, people that I kind of grew up with. But yeah, I loved my experience, and it was actually a very diverse university. um you know, there was a big Latino community there, and I made really good friends that I am, you know, I friendships that I still cherish till this day. But yeah, I one of the things that I remember, and then oh yeah, and then one more thing. Then, and when I think it was like my sophomore year in college, then Jennifer Pena, Tony Pena's daughter, went to study English, and she was there for I think like 2 years, and like we clicked, of course, and we used to go a lot to visit her brother, who was playing at the time, Tony Pena Jr., and his best friend who passed away, Andy Marte. Like we would go to
Hmm.
um, to Orlando because they were playing with the Braves. So that was all. So it's funny because there's always been baseball in my life, even in college. So Jenny and I would drive to, to there and see her brother and see Andy and hang out. So that was always fun too.
It's interesting because nobody thinks that the kids keep in touch, and you said it. You said it well. I mean, you were family. That was the pirate thing. We are family everywhere, and I hearing some of the stories when you guys open the room in Clubhouse. It's like you never lost touch with each other. You kept in touch, and it's really amazing to see that how that family orientation that was given in the teams and kept on going, because I know, particularly in Toronto, that not many of the kids kept in touch. Let's put it that way, because I guess it wasn't the same environment. It was the kids were at home until May, June, and then they came up for 2 months, and then they left again. So they never kept on. But in the case of Pittsburgh, it was just an idea that they amalgamated with each other.
But you know what's funny though? It was not only Pittsburgh. I'll be honest. It's one of these things where, as like an MLB kid, I'm not because there's this bond that nobody else understands. And I will be honest, because I met so many people through my dad and Pete. Like, for example, I'm really one of my great friends is Viviana Gutierrez, now Gutierrez, who married Frankie Gutierrez, but her dad was is Luis Salazar. So
Hmm.
great friends who I used to hang out with her a lot when we were in Boca Raton. And then, I found out that Candy Maldonado's daughter, Ibelice, was in Miami. And I ended up going to Miami and I hung out with her when she was working, or I think she was in college down there. And then I had like TJ, who now is a coach for, the Kansas City Royals. And he came to play with the Pirates here in Pittsburgh, like not even maybe like a month ago. And when he came, like we went to dinner. Like it's one of these things that there's a bond there. I don't know even how to explain it, even, and I even just met like a couple of the people in through Clubhouse, and we reach out and we randomly speak, or I'll randomly get a text from them. You know what I mean? Like it's one of these
Yeah,
things of unexplainable, but it's there. And maybe it's because we understand each other and we understand each other's lifestyle.
and I think one of the things that brings you guys together is that familiarity of understanding each other. Not many people, especially in the baseball, there is a closeness because of, you know it's almost 7 months out of the year that the
Hmm.
kids are together. So, and the kids of different teams, and you travel. One of the things that I admire with Major League Baseball was that you got to travel a lot. The kids got to travel a lot and get to know the country, and got to know everything. So they got to meet other kids, and that brought the closeness in. And then in the case of the guys, they ended up playing baseball, following on their father's footsteps. So they ended up being more united. Um,
Yeah, it's I like I said, I have so many uncles and aunts and in baseball that it's amazing. And I remember one of the stories that I remember till this day is when I was pregnant with my daughter and I was in Cincinnati, my uncle Dave Parker and his wife Kelly, I remember I called them up and I was like, Uncle Dave, Aunt Kelly, like I'm gonna be in Cincinnati. Can you come to a game with me? And then and Auntie Kelly was like, actually, your Uncle Dave has never sat in the stands for a game in Cincinnati. And I was like, really? But I'm gonna tell him I know he loves you, and we'll see if he'll want to go. So he went just to go. He went, and I never understood kind of like why he didn't sit in this, but then I did, because then he started getting bombarded by fans once they saw him and all this stuff. And then we ended up, like, I think watching probably the ending of the game in the family room and stuff like that. But I will always cherish that because he had never gone to a game and that or sat in not at a game, but he had never sat in the stands. And he did it because of me. And then we went to dinner and stuff like that. So that's the bond that we had. And he's a superstar for everybody. He should be in the Hall of Fame, I think. And like I love him dearly. And you know, a lot of people can say so many things about him, but for me, Uncle Dave is like the best. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that's how I grew up.
He's great for a lot of people. I
Mhm.
mean, I you know that the foundation, and I'm going to throw it back to the Pittsburgh Pirates because that foundation of that team of the 70s of the Pittsburgh Pirates was, glo- you know, as a kid growing up, and I was a Pirate fan, but I have always been a Dodger in my heart. But that familiarity that you knew, how many stars there were in each hat of the Pittsburgh Pirates in that era.
And
You
it's
know,
Kelly. I talk to Kelly all the time. She's literally like my big sister. Talk to her every day. And she's like, I had no idea what those stars were. They were just laying around in my house until kids were like, can I get a star? Can I get a star? So it is the funniest thing because everybody talks about the stars, and Kelly had no idea about stars laying in the house. And I find that to be hilarious. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. So that's pretty cool.
yeah, I mean, it was that familiarity and Dave Parker, and you knew that. I think the only team that really you knew the lineups of were the Pittsburgh Pirates of the 70s because you knew the players based on the stars. You didn't know the players based on what they do on the field until I mean I knew that Dave Parker played right field, but it wasn't the day. Oh no, it's the amount of stars that you had on your hat that was gave you the name of the player.
I didn't know. I like I said, I don't remember but I'll tell you this. Living in Pittsburgh now that I live here and going to, prior to the pandemic, because I've only been here, I think, for like 2 years, or a year, I don't even remember. But prior to living here, and every time I came here and my dad does signings and the stories that I hear, and people get so excited and they'll tell me, their experiences. And for me, it's really heartwarming because that's not the Pirates today. So I'm like, it's hard for me to put it. And I hear it from you, and I hear, and we and Kelly, like I hear from everybody. And Kelly lived it, so she knows it's like that. But I didn't. I was when we left Pittsburgh, I think I was like a newborn, or maybe one. No, I think I was actually a newborn. So I don't remember all this. So listening to the fans being like, "Oh my gosh, I remember when your dad used to steal," and to me it's crazy. Like
Oh, I have to show you film. Oh, I have film of your dad stealing bases and doing doing catches out in the outfield like there is no tomorrow.
That's funny. I have to tell you this though. When I started kind of Googling my dad once internet came out and internet became a thing. I always saw awards in my house, and like he always had like he had a huge basement and kind of like a man cave called the dugout. And we used to have like all our parties there, my brothers and I. And it was just full of memorabilia, ball signed and everything. So um when I started Googling him was that I actually was like, oh, okay. And I remember, okay. And I remember one time, and I think I was somewhere in the minor leagues. I don't remember where it was. And I was able to see Mr. Nolan Ryan. And Nolan Ryan, and I came up to him and I was like, "Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. Like, I am Omar Moreno's daughter." And he's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, he gave me a huge hug, and he was around, I think, like a bunch of scouts or just people, and he's like, you tell your dad that I said hi, but whatever picture tells you that he wasn't scared when your dad made it to first is a liar. He's like, your dad had us all terrified. Like that man could fly. He would steal those. And it was one of the like coming from, Mr. Nolan Ryan, you're like, oh. Okay. Like I just never, and every time I come across people like that, like they're always telling me all these stories. I remember Uncle Tommy Lasorda. I saw him, couple of years ago, and he had great things to say about my dad, and just so many people.
So your dad and I share a story with Nolan Ryan.
Really?
Yes. So his first at bat and my first at bat were against Nolan Ryan.
Really?
Just that your dad hit, I struck out. My
That's
it was my only at bat in Major League Baseball because I got injured that spring right after, and I've never so I never got to come back. But I made history because I was the 26th strikeout of Nolan Ryan in a perfect game.
I love
So I made a Hall of Fame without wanting to make it.
That's awesome.
I had the scorecard signed by him. I took a snapshot of the scorecard, and I got it signed by him that evening. And he goes, you should have hit the second ball that I threw you. It was a changeup. I said, no, the second ball that you threw at me was at a 105. Where's the change in that? He goes, yeah, but the other ones were above 110. So I said, oh, thank you very much. I love that changeup.
I love it.
So so I share that with your dad in a certain way. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I understand where you're coming from in the idea that all the great players are part of your family, extended family.
Mhm.
And when you see, and some people say, oh, how can you, how I get asked, when I tell them, well, I play with this player, that player, and we are still friends, and they said, really, they actually want to be friends with you? I said, we played together, we shared different things together. And I imagine with the kids it's the same. You
Mhm.
got to meet all these guys, and they always take a liking to the kids. I think the kids were what brought baseball together.
Yeah, and I
You know,
think it has a lot to do with back then the camaraderie, like just the teams in general, because I feel like it was not only you being part of like one team. There were people, my dad was friends with a lot of people that weren't on his team. But and just I think the respect of the game and how everybody respected it and how you kind of created your name and people would respect it. Because I've come across a lot of people that my dad, like players and major league legends that didn't play with my dad's team, but knew him back then. And when they meet me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love," they immediately like embrace me and embrace, my daughter. And that to me is, admirable. And that to me is amazing. And I find it. I think one of my favorite stories, I'll be honest, one of my favorite stories was a couple years ago. I was down in we're talking about, I don't even know how many years ago, but I was down in Florida with my dad for spring training. Um it was a time where he was going to be, I don't know if you know, but he managed the Panama team that went to the
Mhm.
Olympics. Um so he was down there and he was trying to get some guys to go play in Panama and for his team and this and that. And I saw we went down and we were watching Cleveland, the Indians play, and I saw Aaron Boone, and I see him and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, I want to take a picture with him. Can you take a picture? Can you take a picture for me?" So when I call him over, because I'm during BP, Aaron's like, "Oh my," he had such a fan moment with my dad. He's like, "Oh my gosh, Omar, you were my favorite." Da, da, da. And he just kind of like went on and on and on. And as we're taking the photo, as my dad is taking the photo, I'm like, Aaron, stand there, because I don't know if the photo is going to come out, because my dad's not that great with the camera. So he's like, "I cannot believe that Omar Moreno is taking my photo. Like, can you take a photo of, can you take a photo of us afterwards?" I'm like, "Yeah." So like stuff like that. And this is like the manager of the Yankees. Like, this was back when he played, but now he's the manager. So it's like one of these things where it's like so normal. And then I guess they started talking, and when his dad used to like catch and like kind of started talking. So it's like those little moments that, have meant so much in my life, with all these people who are great, who did so many great things and are so humble and so down to earth and so welcoming, with, me and my family.
Yeah, I mean, uh, and it's funny because when you look at the Latin countries and the difference in how many players they bring up, and that's why your dad is so memorable in a certain way, because Panama has had players, but it's not the quantity of players that they produce, but the quality of players they produced.
Mhm.
And you, the, the the two latest in retiring are happen to be your dad and Mr. Rod Carew.
Mhm.
And Carew, I'm I remember one of the stories that he said is, I don't know how am I going to retire and go back home because I won't have a life. Everyone will be after me.
Mhm.
And it's true. I mean, if you think about it, and nobody knew that Carew was Panamanian. Everyone thought that he was American and that he came from there and he grew up there. And that wasn't the case. You
Yeah.
know, Panama is one of those countries that has been kind of been left out of telling the story of baseball.
Mhm.
And it's people like your dad that can tell the story because they grew up in that era of baseball that is so cherished.
Yeah, it's one of these places, and Rod Carew, Mr. Rod Carew, oh my gosh. I'm really good friends with his wife, and I know his wife and I know him. And I remember being pregnant, and I think it was there was like a dinner, and if I'm not mistaken, it was at the US Embassy in Panama, and I was pregnant with my daughter and he was there, and I have those photos which I cherish. Great man, and he has a great wife, Miss Rhonda. And you're right. You're right. Panama is one of those places that the talent is there, but it's not being developed, and it's very it's baseball's become very political, and that's the problem. And but I mean, the talent is there. It's kind of like I always tell my dad in Spanglish, que Panamá es una minita de oro, but nobody kind of you know, sees it, and nobody wants to take the time to develop players.
Bueno, vamos a hablar en español ahora que ya lo sacaste al aire.
Okay.
Tenemos audiencia que habla español y vamos a hablar un poquito sobre lo que hemos estado hablando un poquito, vamos a traerlo en español un poco. Las experiencias de ser panameña en Estados Unidos, la experiencia de tener un papá que es un ídolo para muchos en la comunidad latina. ¿Qué ha significado eso para ti?
Sí, la verdad es que para mí Panamá significa mucho. Ese es un país que quiero mucho. Yo soy mitad panameña, mitad americana. So I am dual citizen. Panameña extranjera, como le dicen allá. Mi cédula es PE. Significa mucho. Pienso que mi papá, aunque te voy a decir algo, nadie es profeta en su tierra y eso es algo que es verdad. Porque yo siempre he sentido que en Panamá, que aquí en Estados Unidos, aman a mi papá más que en Panamá. Y es un país tan chiquito, pero, pero, yo siempre he dicho que mi papá es un orgullo panameño. Y lo siento así. Y sus números lo demuestran así. So, para mí es un orgullo ser su hija.
Y me imagino que no solo es un orgullo, sino que lleva ciertas responsabilidades con ese orgullo,
Ujú.
porque eh, no es ser solo ser una persona en el mundo civil, pero es llevar la estatura de tu papá contigo a donde camines, porque siempre los ojos siempre están sobre ti, en cierta
Sí,
manera.
esto es algo que, y curiosamente, por eso fue que yo me mudé para Estados Unidos. Siempre para mí, y si tú te has dado cuenta, en realidad yo me mantengo muy behind the scenes. Siempre como que soy así, y así soy con la carrera de mi hija, y así soy con la carrera de mi papá. porque siento como que mientras que yo crecí, siempre tuve mucha responsabilidad social, tuve mucha responsabilidad de mantener el nombre de mi papá intachable, de mantener el nombre de mi papá intacto, de que nadie dijera nada de él. Fue algo que a nosotros, a mis hermanos y a mí siempre nos inculcaron desde chiquitos que mm, hay de ti, me acuerdo que mi mamá siempre nos decía, hay de ti que te encuentre con droga, que te encuentren con droga, que te encuentre con, porque las primeras planas no van a decir so and so, van a decir la hija de Omar Moreno en contra. Entonces, y dice, y no los vamos a sacar de la cárcel. Eso es algo que se me quedó grabado desde que yo estaba chiquitita, no joke. Entonces yo siempre como que crecí así. Yo crecí muy consciente de con quién siempre, de quién me rodeo, de dónde estoy, de los lugares que frecuento, de lo que hago. Yo crecí así. Yo sé que es que de repente no es la generación de hoy en día, pero y en mis tiempos no había social media. Pero yo crecí así, yo crecí que todo lo que yo hago tiene una consecuencia y la consecuencia no era nada más para mí, sino que una consecuencia para mi familia. Y mi papá tiene una carrera muy bonita. Son muchas cosas que muchas personas no saben, pero mi papá viene de Puerto Armuelles, que queda en la frontera de Panamá con Costa Rica. Y es un lugar muy lejano y mi papá pasó muchas cosas para llegar a donde llegó. Entonces yo siempre, por eso, siempre admiré su trabajo fuerte y todo, y nunca quise nunca en mi vida he querido hacer nada para manchar su nombre, como dicen.
Bueno, vamos a hablar de tu hija porque tu hija es muy popular.
Ujú,
Por ahí, por ahí me sonaron los pajaritos diciendo que es una estrella total.
sí.
Hablemos un poco de tu hija, qué hace, cómo lo hace, qué está haciendo y para dónde quiere ir.
Mi hija yo digo que mi hija casualmente es un milagrito de Dios. Ella nació a las 28 semanas, borderline 6 a 7 meses. Estaba ahí que casi tiro 7 meses. Y ella siempre ha sido una niña súper talentosa. Ella hacía patinaje sobre hielo, lo hizo por 8 años, comenzó a la edad de 3 años en Milwaukee. Siempre ganó medalla de oro en todas sus competencias. Y a la edad de 6 años ya estaba landing her first, como le dicen, axel. O sea que ella siempre ha sido ella es eso de ser atleta, ella lo lleva. Y después se puso a jugar tenis y también hizo gimnasia. Y bueno, eso entre todas esas cosas, a los 2 años estábamos caminando en el mall de Milwaukee y se me acercó un agente de modelaje de la agencia Ford Models y me dijo que la llevara y la llevé, la firmaron instantáneamente y desde entonces ha estado modelando y ha modelado. Wow, ahora tiene 12 años. Ella hizo su primer comercial de bebé a los 9 meses en Panamá para el gobierno nacional. Y después vinimos para Estados Unidos y tiene ya aquí 10 años modelando. Y yo digo que para ella no hay límite. Ella ha hecho de todo, ha sabido. Y yo, gracias a Dios, yo he estado ahí como he podido ser mamá a tiempo completo y apoyarla en todo lo que hace. Así que ella, gracias a Dios, ha tenido mucho éxito en lo que hace.
Ahora, Leury Moreno, ¿cuáles son sus ilusiones? Aparte de, porque sabemos que la ilusión es tu hija y su carrera, la carrera, mantener el nombre de tu papá en el medio ambiente para que a nadie se le olvide quién fue Omar Moreno.
Ujú.
Pero, ¿qué hay de Leury Moreno? ¿Qué quiere Leury Moreno para ella?
Bueno, yo digo que Leury Moreno, la verdad es que mi vida es mi hija. Para mí mi felicidad literalmente es manejar la carrera de ella. Yo quiero verla triunfar y que ella logre todo lo que se propone. Pero eso es lo que a mí, honestamente, te puedo decir que me hace feliz. Antes de tenerla, hace años atrás, yo quería ser gerente general de un equipo de grandes ligas. También quería ser gente de grandes ligas. Pero a raíz de tenerla a ella y el tiempo que eso me consume, muchas de las cosas que yo tenía han cambiado. Pero por ahora lo que me hace feliz es ella. Es la carrera de ella y manejar su carrera. Así.
Wow. Pero bueno, no está tan lejos. Pues, ahora ya con la señora que está en Miami como gerente general, todo es posible.
Yeah. Sí.
Bueno,
El béisbol me encanta, Eduardo, te soy sincera, me encanta el béisbol, pero me encanta más el béisbol de antes. Entonces pienso que una de las razones por la cual ya no me acuerdo que antes, mi era y la era que yo disfruté al máximo el béisbol, para serte sincera, fue la era donde Ken Griffey Jr. era mi jugador preferido. So, esa era para mí fue wow. Entonces, de esa era a la de ahora, tantas cosas han cambiado. Y ese amor y esa pasión que yo le tenía al béisbol de antes, no es el mismo que le tengo ahora. Ahora casi no veo juegos. Antes yo los veía todos. Ahora veo efectivamente los equipos que siento que me da, que are exciting, porque muchos no hay, no son. Y hay demasiados errores, entonces yo he visto demasiado béisbol en mi vida. Y ahora siento, y yo sé que muchas personas no estarán de acuerdo conmigo, pero yo siento que ahora cualquiera llega a grandes ligas y no es como en los tiempos de antes de mi papá. Y cualquiera sube y baja de grandes ligas. Y ese no es el béisbol que yo estoy acostumbrado a ver. Entonces,
no.
se me ha cambiado, ya no me ilusiona como me ilusionaba antes de decir, yo quiero ser la primera GM hija de pelotero for a major league team. Ya no me ilusiona porque el béisbol se ha comercializado demasiado y se ha perdido, yo siento que la esencia de lo que yo veía. Y ya no, o sea, y se ha puesto demasiado, no sé ni cómo decir. Si tú miras a mi papá tiene todas las jugadas que mi papá hacía, se robaba bases, no sé qué, y ahora la gente no lo hace. Entonces se ha perdido
Eh,
tanto.
es que y tienes razón, te lo voy a decir porque yo lo jugué, lo experimenté y veo el juego de béisbol vuelto un negocio más que un juego como de pasión y de cariño que los jugadores le tenían antes.
Uh-huh.
Que todo es para proteger el juego, todo es para proteger a los jugadores, para que tengan más. Y lo de protección de los jugadores, te lo digo, estoy en cierta manera de acuerdo, pero no lo puedes llevar a extremos.
Uh-huh.
O sea, un robo de segunda base que no puedas tirártela al segunda base para quebrar la jugada no es el béisbol. El béisbol era un juego ofensivo más que defensivo en los viejos tiempos. Eh, el hecho de que ahora comiencen en segunda base en los extra innings,
Una
o
cosa,
sea,
ni que fuera Little League. Es una cosa que eso me mata. Eso, entre eso y los analíticos, y te voy a decir algo, yo no tengo, por ejemplo, nada contra la tecnología, yo pienso que de mano a mano juntos, 50 y 50, es una cosa que hasta mi papá me dice a cada rato, si yo hubiese tenido los analíticos de ahora, yo me hubiese robado 400, me hubiese robado 2000 bases, si me dan, ¿me entiendes? Pero se ha puesto que es todo analítico, y entonces se ha perdido para mí
la
los
esencia.
béisbol y la esencia del béisbol y los fundamentos del béisbol. Ya antes, yo me acuerdo y yo lo hablo con muchos Major League Baseball Legends, y decían que para llegar a Grandes Ligas tú tenías que batear 300. Eso no era que tú ibas a estar en Grandes Ligas bateando 100 ni 200, no. Que para llegar ahí arriba, que pisar Grandes Ligas y tomarte tu cafecito era bateando 300 por lo menos. Entonces ahora ya eso se ha perdido, y ahora como, todo es tan analítico y todo que no me emociona.
No, pero es que vamos a lo fundamental del juego. En los viejos tiempos se jugaba el pisa y corre.
Uh-huh,
Y eso ya no lo miras.
uh-huh,
En
uh-huh.
los viejos tiempos tú llegabas al estadio, yo me recuerdo, cuando yo era novato en las ligas mayores, yo llegaba al estadio a las 2 de la tarde para un juego de las 7 de la noche.
Uh-huh.
Ahorita ya no sé, ahorita los jugadores llegan a las 4:30, casi 5 de la tarde, salen al campo a medio echar unos cuantos batazos para calentar y se meten al clubhouse a jugar juegos de video. O sea, eso no es béisbol.
Ujú.
Nosotros no teníamos tiempo para eso en los viejos tiempos.
Sí, eso. Y no nada más tú, yo le escucho de todas las, de las leyendas del béisbol que le han cambiado. Entonces, para mí, siento que la dirección que está tomando o que ha tomado no es la dirección, no es la,
Correcta.
no es la dirección correcta y no es la dirección que me apasionaba a mí. Entonces, prefiero enfocarme en mi hija y en su carrera y en las cosas que ella hace. Y ya no, ¿me entiendes? Ya no me encanta el béisbol como me encantaba antes. Ya no, antes era mi pasión, me la pasaba, tú me preguntas cuál y yo me lo sabía todo, pero ahora ya casi ni veo.
No, es que ese es el problema. Estamos perdiendo a los amantes del béisbol
Ujú.
por esa misma razón, porque lo están cambiando a tal nivel de que ya no excita el juego.
Y para mí una de las cosas que te soy sincera, que en realidad eh, siento de cierta forma un insulto porque no es, tú sabes que en los tiempos de antes se jugaba por la pasión, por el amor al béisbol, y ahora están pagando millones y millones y los jugadores no están jugando. ¿Sabes? Es como que me dieron 50 millones y ya no importa. Entonces ya como que se ha perdido esas ganas de dar tu todo, de que la gente diga de que, oh my gosh, yo fui a ver mi pelotero preferido, ya no. Entonces, no sé, pienso que el dinero, aunque no lo crean, el tener demasiado dinero envuelto, para mí, en mi opinión, ha dañado el béisbol. O ha dañado el béisbol.
Uf, lo ha sofocado realmente porque, vamos a ser sinceros, cuando jugaba tu papá, cuando jugué yo, el salario mínimo era por los suelos, 32 mil dólares al año, y era si eras bueno, digamos, en cierta manera. Los salarios grandes venían con lo que tú hacías en el campo de juego.
Sí, yo creo que mi papá tuvo un contrato millonario, uno o dos, y, y no se compara con los
No, es que
500, 400, 300 millones. Y me acuerdo que él siempre me dice, yo nací un poco de décadas demasiado tarde, o demasiado temprano.
no,
Porque imagínate, ahora si un pelotero se roba 30 bases es un fenómeno. Y mi papá se robaba 96. O sea, es una cosa.
bueno, vamos más allá. O sea, el hecho de que en estos días el salario mínimo comienza en 1.5 millones de dólares. O sea, cuando un pelotero de los tiempos antiguos dice, yo comienzo en cuánto,
Ujú. Me acuerdo
y no tengo que jugar todos los juegos tampoco. O sea,
ya, y cuando Kelly Stargell dice que el papá de ella una vez tuvo una conversación con ella y le dijo que oh my gosh, que he could never imagine un pelotero ganando 10 millones. Y dice, ella siempre me dice, oh my gosh, mi papá se debe estar revolcando en his grave porque de verdad que ahora mismo si él ve esos salarios, entonces te comienzas a poner en perspectiva esos peloteros con los de ahora y tú dices, bueno, no habría dinero para pagarle a un Willie Stargell hoy en día.
oh no,
¿Me entiendes?
definitivamente.
No habría dinero para pagarle a un Rod Carew hoy en día. Entonces tú te pones como que a pensar y tú dices, so,
Bueno, Lori, te agradezco por haber estado con nosotros.
gracias a ti.
Eh, pero antes de irme, porque vamos a soltar aquí el galardón de lo que viene de Leury Moreno antes de que, y vamos a comprometerla desde ya, porque señoras, aquí en Spanglish Sports World vamos a tener nada más y nada menos que un show por la señorita Leury Moreno y la señorita Kelly Stargell.
Uh-huh.
Nos van a dejar saber cuándo, pero ya
No,
está pactado eso para que comience y nos traigan Growing Up in MLB,
growing up in the big leagues.
Growing Up in the Big Leagues. Growing Up in the Big Leagues, pronto viniendo al canal de mujeres, al Her Network y a Spanglish World Network.
Yeah.
Entonces, bueno, Lori, muchas gracias de nuevo. Fue un placer tenerte.
Igualmente.
I just want to remind everybody that this show can be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network and its affiliates on social media. Remember to go to our website, SpanglishSportsWorld.com, for all the news. There you can read articles by our columnists and hosts of shows as well. Remember, Spanglish Sports World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, but especially live it. Because Spanglish Sports World is sport, and sport is Spanglish Sports World. In the name of Leury Moreno, my name is Eduardo Rari. We'll see you here tomorrow for another edition of this show. And until then, please remain at home. Please remain safe during these pandemic times of COVID-19.
Thank you so much.